This is Judge Joe Brown, and you're watching We All Be News TV, the
News-free Dixie.
news-free Dixie for the 21st century.
Okay, We All Be is on the help on Dr. Talagbe, who has a special project, a passion project that concerns the Gullah GeecHEe Wars, and we'd like to have her talk about this hidden history, this forgotten or hidden chapter of American history that concerns the liberation of Black folks, African people. How you doing today, man?
I'm fine. Thank you. How are you?
I'm good. I can't complain. So tell us a little bit about your story that you have. This very important story that we need to hear as Black people.
Yes, I wrote a screenplay on the Gullah GeecHEe Wars that occurred during the 19th century, but actually I also included the Yamasee War that occurred in the 18th century. So actually my screenplay goes from the 18th century into the early part of the 19th century, dealing with the war that was fought by the Yamasee and Gullah GeecHEe people living along the Sea Islands in South Carolina and Georgia. And then I go into the Gullah GeecHEe War that was fought in Florida during the 19th century. Some people call it the Seminole War, and I'm dealing with the first Seminole War, but actually it was a war that was fought between the Gullah GeecHEe people and other autochthonous people living in Florida against the United States government.
Oh, wow. So why do you think it's important that people know about these stories or these events today?
I think it's important for people to know about this particular aspect of our history because, unfortunately, the current types of movies that are available to us deal mostly with our enslavement and the most grimmest aspects of our enslavement, They don't deal with us as being people who won. We're just seen as being docile individuals who never fought back, or for the most part, were complacent with our existence and didn't even try and run away and determine to be free. You take most of the movies that have been offered to us in terms of what you see in the movies. You have 12 Years a Slave, Roots, and you could go on and on with all the types of movies that basically are available to us in the movies as well as on TV, and they all deal with us in the saddest state of affairs. And I thought it was time for that to stop. And so about almost a year ago, I started writing my screenplay because I wanted people to see brave, courageous men and women who fought back and won, not just fighting back, but also winning. And I thought that was very, very important. And also to show that them prospering, because not only do I deal with the wars that were fought by the Gullah GeecHEe people, I deal with the settlements that they established throughout Florida as well as in Georgia. And I show how prosperous those settlements actually were. As a matter of fact, the people were so prosperous in terms of their ability to farm and to raise animals and cattle and chickens, and then to have horses, raise horses, until people from all over the United States, as well as parts of the Caribbean, came to do business with them because they realized that they had the best products. And so people wanted to come and do business with them. So they sold their agricultural products. They sold the animals that they raised. They were involved in naval stores. So the wood, they would come and get the wood that the men had, what would you call that? They cut down the trees and then they sawed them and made the wood in such a way that it could be used to build with. And so they would come there and they would get all of these products from these people. Not to mention, these were not dumb people. And although when you see slave movies, they always show these people that are unable to speak any language properly. They're confused, they're just not very smart, supposedly. But these were extremely smart people. They spoke numerous European languages as well as numerous autochthonous people's languages, because they were actually their languages, to the extent that people would come and get them to act as translators for them. As a matter of fact, they were considered to be sense carriers because not only did they speak the language, they knew the nuances of the languages. And so, that expression about being able to pick sense out of nonsense,
Right.
They were able to do that, especially for some of the Native American people who were not familiar with dealing with European people. And so in their interactions with them, they wanted the Gullah GeecHEe people around them so that they could make sense of what Europeans were really saying to them. So they were needed in all sorts of areas of dealing with European people. Some of it because they had lived amongst European people. Some of them had lived amongst European people. And so they knew a great deal about them, or it's something that they learned, because something else that's happened with these people. Once they escaped, or when they began to live autonomously, their children had to go to school. So they had to learn the languages, they had to learn math, they had to learn how to write. So they were also very familiar with ideographic scripts as well as object scripts, and they used them, in their daily dealings with other autochthonous people living throughout Florida and other parts of the Americas, and also in just teaching the history of their settlements to the people who were living there. So these were very, very intelligent people, and that's something else you don't see much in movies. We're always seen as being dumb people who were relying on others because we're just incapable of doing too much of anything for ourselves. But these were people who were living autonomously, and they didn't need the help of anybody. If they had help, they had help from other autochthonous people living in the Bahamas and Cuba and Jamaica and other parts of this hemisphere.
So I'm glad you shared that with us concerning the actual lives, the day-to-day lives of our people back then. Do you think that people be more receptive of movies dealing with that era if people do the truth about the conditions of the people back then, like how they, their day-to-day and how they interacted with each other, how they saw themselves despite of the conditions? You think people will be less against so-called slave movies if they knew the truth about the actual history?
Absolutely, because they're the model for us. These were people who got along with one another. They had what word am I trying to use? They had a code, and they all, they followed that particular code, so they were protective of one another. They weren't trying to lie and cheat and steal from one another. They used the skills that they had to help everybody who was living amongst them. And not only that, they willingly took in people who had just newly fled from their enslavers. They were welcomed into their settlements. And actually, the men were known to go back to the northern part of the United States and bring women back to the settlements. And, they became, you might say they were something like mail order brides, you might say, but they brought women back into the settlement and cared for them, and made them become part of the family. So, they were just creating an environment that was conducive to thriving, and that was very important. They weren't just getting along. They weren't just living hand to mouth. They were thriving. As a matter of fact, people knew that the settlements were so prosperous. So you had people as far away as the New England states getting in boats or walking, trying to make their way to Florida to live amongst these people. And when you hear about these people, they just try and make you believe that it was just a couple hundred black people who were living autonomously in Florida, and that was not the case at all. We're talking about their settlements dotted the whole entire state, or what we now call the state of Florida. So you have places like Gullah Town, Mulatto Women's Town. You had Pender Town. You had Watermelon Town. You had all of the, that's just the name of a few, settlements that existed, but they were all over. And like Pender Town, for example, that's where you had peanuts growing. They were known for peanuts, and that's why they named their town Pender. So if you wanted to go and get good peanuts, that was the place to go. Like my mother, she likes peanuts that are boiled. I always thought they were not very good. I don't know how you feel about boiled peanuts, but you could, go there and get your peanuts, and they would boil them for you, or you knew how to take them back and boil them yourself, or you roasted them, and all the other dishes that we've created that have peanuts in them, like the peanut stews and so forth. So that's why the town got its name is Pender. Same thing with Watermelon Town. Of course, they were known for watermelons. So if you wanted to go there to get a good watermelon, that was a place to go, because that's what they were noted for. And so you find that occurring all throughout Florida. And, unfortunately, they don't talk about that. As a matter of fact, the only thing they do talk about was this rundown settlement that revisionist historians and white supremacists are still trying to make people believe was a place where people fled from the north and came there and lived free, and that's Gracia Real de Santa Teresa de Mosaic. And supposedly that was a place where people came and lived free and did well and so forth, but they know they're lying, because it was just this dilapidated old town with a rickety a couple of buildings, and it was put there to act as a buffer between the people, or the Spaniards, living in St. Augustine and Pensacola, the two major cities in Florida during that particular time, and the people, or the Europeans at the time, was primarily the British that were living in what became known as Georgia, as well as South Carolina, Alabama, and so forth. And so that was their duty, to act as a buffer, it was like an early warning post to let the people know, or let the Spaniards know, that the British were coming. And it was their job to fight against the British and handle the situation long before they were able to get into St. Augustine or Pensacola. And in addition to that, the women were not allowed to live with the men. So the husbands stayed in the rundown settlement of Mosaic, and the women were forced to stay in Pensacola and Florida and act as domestics in the homeland of the Spaniards living there. And they were basically taken advantage of. In addition to working, they were raped, they were beaten, their children were raped and beaten as well. But still, to this day, if you take a trip to Florida, that's one of the main sites that you're supposed to go and see. They want you to go and see Mosaic. And of course, they, try and make it look like these were people who lived very well. So they have these costumes. They've made up these costumes for these people that supposedly show them as these well-fed, well cared for, nicely dressed individuals. And that was not the case at all.
Oh, wow. Why are they so invested in telling the lie? I mean, this system, or...
I think they're invested in telling the lie because it's done to keep us in our place. You're made to believe that your ancestors were nothing, so how could you be much of anything? And unfortunately, a lot of us, we believe the hype. And so we believe that we haven't done anything, and lamentably will probably never, ever be able to accomplish anything. So it serves their interest to keep the lie going. It keeps them supposedly in power. But we know that that's changing. There's been a dramatic paradigm shift, and people's eyes are opening up, and they're doing whatever they want, that they think is going to help us or help them to stay in charge, you know. So you have the dirty water and the dirty air we breathe and the food filled with GMOs and all that stuff, you know, and then the schools are not educating the kids properly. And so, you know, if you don't know any better, how could you do any better, unfortunately?
So I want to understand you, like what motivates you to learn this history and try to tell this story to the rest of the world? I mean, I'm just curious about your background and your motivation.
Well, although I was born and raised in New York, I was reared by parents from South Carolina and Georgia. My father, his people were from the Sea Islands, Beaufort, South Carolina, and then they went out to other places of South Carolina. My mother's from Georgia. And I don't know, just something in me, this information just really intrigued me, especially when I think of what my father went through when he was growing up. When he left South Carolina, he left never ever to really want to return to that area. The only thing that he would do, he would go back to South Carolina if someone was dying and he wanted to see them before they died, or he would go back for the funeral. But other than that, he really didn't want to have anything to do with that particular area because of the way that he was raised. And then as I got older, he never really talked about that. I guess he really didn't want to subject us to those images and maybe cloud our perception about life. But as he got older, he began to talk about that. And I found out that one of my cousins, I guess my third cousin, fourth cousin, was lynched in Columbia, Georgia. Yeah. And, you know, can you imagine holding on to all this information, knowing what you had to deal with, you know, growing up or hearing the information as you're growing up. And so I always wanted to try and make things better, give the family something to feel proud about, you know, because even my perception about being in the South was tainted by just, you know, my father and my mother's ideas of what the South was like. So I wanted to uncover some of the good aspects of that particular part of this country. And just to find out about people who fought back. It's amazing, you know, to me, you know, or was amazing to me at the time, because I had never heard about that. I never learned anything about that in school. So to hear my father talk about these people, or not my father, or to my father talking about the people being one way, and then going or beginning to do my research when I was working on my doctorate at Temple University in Philadelphia, and then hearing something completely different, it just opened my eyes up to something that was completely new for me, you know, and it changed my whole perception about what I was going to school for and what aspect of African American studies I wanted to deal with. So my major became African resistance to enslavement. Or my major, of course, was African American studies, but then my specialization was African resistance to enslavement, and I dealt particularly with the people known as the Seminoles, who we now know were the Gullah GeecHEe people who fought and won against the United States government.
I'm really fascinated by all that, especially that last part. Why do you think people want to make Africans or Black people Indians? What's that phenomenon? If they were indeed not Seminoles but Gullah GeecHEe, why would people do not want to know us to know that?
Because they didn't want people to know that there were Black people fighting, as people that we now call Black people, but they're really melanated people. We could even refer to them as being white people. If you listen to people such as Taj Tariq Bey and Sia the Duke of Tears and so forth and so on. They didn't want anyone to know that there were people that were fighting against this government and winning. So as opposed to telling the people who they really were, they decided that they would call them Indians and they would call them Seminoles. But they knew Seminole was a derogatory term. Some people say that it isn't, but if you look at a lot of the dictionaries, it says a domesticated cow who escapes to a wild existence. That's the meaning of the word Seminole. And you can go the same thing with maroon, another negative word, really saying the same exact thing. Someone who lived in a civilized area and then runs off to live in the wild. So they didn't want them to know. So every time, they kept that information away from people as much as they could. But if you happen by chance to get a hold of a newspaper, you would see the word Seminole, you see the word Indian, and then you would say, oh, that doesn't have anything to do with me. Because again, of course, the people were even told that they were not the indigenous or the autochthonous people of this land. So, if you've been told that you're a Negro, you're Black, you're colored, when you hear people talking about the Indians or you hear them talking about the Seminoles, you say, well, that doesn't concern me because that's not me. But we found out recently that, it did concern us and they were our people. And even if they were talking about so-called Indians, they were still our people, and if you talk to most of the people, the melanated people in this country, they'll always tell you about the indigenous people that were that they're a member of. They'll say that they're Cherokee or they're Blackfoot or Tuscarora, and we could go on and on, all the names of the various autochthonous people of this land. So we always knew that it was there, but we didn't have all of the information. It's being uncovered to this day. Like I recently found out that my people are Yamasee. I would hear relatives like my aunts, my great aunts and so forth talking about us being Cherokee. But then after hearing a Yamasee man by the name of B, Hidden Eagle is his name, and then he was talking about some people to try and get some of the advantages of being Cherokee, for example. Instead of saying that they were Yamasee, they said that they were Cherokee, but knowing full well that they were Yamasee. And it was funny because I was listening to him on the radio show, and he was talking about the people who refer to themselves as Wright and Robinson and Roundtree, and he was just naming them off. He said these were the Yamasee people. And I said, wow, I had to even email him or do Twitter, although he didn't respond. But I said, wow. I said, you're talking about my people. I said, my maiden name is Wright, and my people are the Roundtrees and the Robinsons and, of course, the Wrights. I said, I never knew that before until he broke it down. So we're learning a lot about who we are now, and we didn't have that information before. So when we heard about the Indians fighting against the United States United States, we never thought of that as being anything that concerned us. And if you ask the enslavers about it during that particular time, it's just those Indians. So we never really, some of us didn't want to investigate, but there were always some amongst us who were doing the investigating, because there's always people, that, or throughout our whole history, there have always been people who knew, no, this is not right, but they're trying to tell me that's not right, and that's, I guess, why we're here today. You have like a Martin Delaney, Denmark Vesey, Nat Turner, Gabriel Prosser, these people who weren't drinking the Kool-Aid, and they wanted to know something else, and so they did. I know David Walker said that right before they killed him, he said that he prayed that God would raise a group of historians amongst his people, meaning us, who would come back or who would begin to tell the history as it really needed to be told. So I think I'm one of those people that David Walker prayed for to come, that would tell the history the way the history really needed it to be told. And there are many, more people that are just not buying the Kool-Aid. They're coming out of school and they're saying, wait a minute, that doesn't sound right. let me do a little bit of investigating on my own. And that's exactly what you have. So we're beginning to open our eyes and know that we are the people, the Gullah GeecHEe people. And I think it is helping many of us to be proud. Of course, there are some people who are still asleep, and they really, they don't have a clue, and they're pretty satisfied with their status, and they're not trying to get any more information. And that is what it is, but there are many more amongst us who are really trying to find out the truth about our existence in this part of the world.
Well, that's excellent. I'm glad that with the technology that we have now, I can only imagine what David Walker would have done today in terms of spreading the message, the way he was spreading back then. And it's interesting to note that all the people that you named were very articulate and literate, that they were very well educated, even though they didn't go to any so-called formal schools per se.
Right, you're absolutely right. And when you think about it, and I would tell my students this all the time, that at one point, the way that people were selling drugs on the corner, at one point, they were selling books on the corner. It was all done in secrecy. You wait till there were no European people around and say, hey, I got that book, and people would buy the books. They would hide them. It's like David Walker. He was hiding the books. He was sending his copies of his plays back down south, and they were reading them in church. So when, I guess that's why white people decided, or they're not white, the Europeans decided that they would have some Europeans sit in the church during their services to make sure that they were really talking about what they wanted them to talk about. But that was the place at one point where you went to get information about what was going on around you, and so, there were literate people, there were always literate people. They were hoping, that there weren't many among us who were able to read and write, but they've always been there. And that's how the information has just continued to be told to us, by us.
And also, I noticed that every period of our existence here that we do, speaking of being literate, that we had a fascination with the media. Like, we always knew the value of telling our own stories, whether it be Frederick Douglass with the North Star or the African Freedom Journal, or even now in Memphis, where I'm just, we just got through observing the 125th anniversary of the lynching at the Curve. These are Ida B. Wells' friends who were successful black businessmen who got lynched 125 years ago yesterday. And she had her own newspaper that she owned, that she launched a career of anti-lynching against. What is your opinion of the state of black media today, though? I mean, you look at every time period we knew the importance of media, whether it be Malcolm X, Study Muhammad Speaks, or Marcus Garvey with his paper, The Negro World. Where do we stand today as black folks in the media?
I think it still continues. Look at your show, We All Be TV. We're not reading the print copy so much, but, now we have the internet. And so we have your shows, many other shows, and that's where people are going to get the information. So I don't think it's died down at all. The form has changed a little bit, but it's definitely still here. What will we do without your program? How will we get the information? A lot of people, they don't know about Ida B. Wells and, her impetus for creating her newspaper, or her friends, like we were talking about, a couple of days ago when they were getting ready to lynch the young man. And I'm horrible with names. And he's, they asked him, did he want to say anything before he died? And he said, yeah, go west.
Right,
you don't have to deal with this foolishness. You know what I mean? And so it continues on, and because of the success that you're having, there will be other people that will stand up and they'll begin to say, I can do that. Let me start my own program. Because we know that what we're getting on CNN and MSNBC and Fox and all those other racist channels, that's not the truth. And so we've always known that we need our own. And, and you're meeting that need, and there'll be others that will come after you, and they will help to meet the needs of our community as well.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. It's interesting. I'm always fascinated with the Carolinas. There's something about the Carolinas that produce some exceptional people. Like I was when you said that, I was actually thinking about. Are you familiar with Lester Middleton? That's his name, I believe, out of South Carolina.
Lester who?
Lester Middleton, I believe. He was a TV program host out of, I think, Columbia, South Carolina. He had a show back in the 90s and the 80s, I believe. He passed away some years ago. But he was a black journalist out of Carolina who was bringing in people like Dr. Francis Cress Welsing to interview any black scholar of their period you could think of. He interviewed them. And I think the show was called For the People. But I mean, he was from South Carolina doing that. And this back like 20-something years ago. He was doing all these exceptional shows, and I discovered him through internet. I didn't know about him during this time, but by internet, some of his shows have been uploaded, and also Gil Noble, people like that. So like you said, there's always gonna be people around that can inspire other people. Because the point of the matter is that you got to be the change you want to see. You got to be the solution to what you want to find the answer to. So I want to ask you this as well, because I mean, you're a scholar and you do all this work about our people. So would it be correct to say that we already had African people over in America before the Europeans, or would that be incorrect?
Oh, no, that would definitely be correct.
Okay.
Absolutely. And you can think of the Olmec, who are the parents of the Yamatse and other autochthonous people. You think about even coming from West Africa, you have a Bulgari who came here to the Americas, and initially sent a few people in a couple hundred ships to come and see what was going on. And when only one ship came back and the others stayed, he decided he would get 2,000 ships and he would take the trip himself. So we know that there has been interchange between us and Africa for quite some time. You think about the Moors, who were living on the Iberian Peninsula and who came here. And, we could go on and on about the people that we've come here. I know Dr. Ivan Van Sertima had the book, They Came Before Columbus, and he talked about different strains of cotton that were only found at one point in Africa, were found here in the United States, and other types of foodstuff that were indigenous to Africa, finding its way over here. Or you think about foods that were indigenous to this particular area now being found in all parts of Africa. For instance, cassava. Cassava is indigenous to the Americas, but now it's something that's eaten throughout West Africa, and I suspect other parts of Africa as well. It's become, basically a delicacy. It's eaten in all sorts of ways, fufu and gari and so forth. And that was, food that was a plant that was originally from the Americas. And, now it's over in that area. We could go on and on and on. Even if you think of the way that, or the types of gods that are revered, gods and goddesses that are revered. And you look at the similarities between the reverence for those particular gods and goddesses in this part of the world, and you compare that to the way that they're revered in other parts of the world, and then you can see that interaction has always occurred. I know even years ago I heard about Bodun being celebrated or adhered to in this particular part of the world, and thinking of it as, that came out of the Haitian interaction, and then finding out, no, it existed in this part of the world maybe just as long, or if not longer, than in Haiti. So there's always been this interaction between the cultures of this part of the world and the other parts of the Caribbean and Africa. So, and of course that continues. I think about the god Ogun,
Mm-hmm.
who was revered by various people, not just the Yoruba people, but all different people from different cultures. When they got ready to go to war, knowing that Ogun was the god of war as well as the god of iron. When they got ready to go to war, for example, they called on Ogun, no matter, what their particular ethnicity happened to be. But when they got ready to fight their battles, he was the one that they wanted on their side.
Wow.
So, yeah, there's always been an interaction between us.
So they didn't call Jesus, they called Ogun.
Right, that's right, absolutely.
We got this. Yeah, wow. I mean, actually, I brought it up. Yeah, go ahead. Yes, ma'am, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, well, my name Ogunleye is because of the god Ogun, god of iron.
Oh, yeah,
or he who comes to make war. So that's the literal translation. He who comes to make war.
Oh, wow. Well, you had come to make war with this white supremacist system in terms of ideology and history. So you're doing a great job with that. Let me ask you this. I mean, you think, man, because religion is such a big part of our daily existence as Black people, or has been a part of our historical narrative. If you look at people like Nat Turner and Harriet Tubman, they both were ministers or preachers. Is religion, our relationship with religion, is it a problem for us to, when it comes to our liberation?
Yeah, I think it is. And I don't want to step on any toes because it's most of the wars they say have been fought in the name of some sort of religion.
Right.
But it has been a problem for us. I think it's made us docile and complacent, and the way that it's worshipped, unfortunately, by too many of us. We're worshiping somebody else's image of God.
Mm-hmm.
And we've completely left out a goddess right there. There was no, it's not like Asa, Aset, and Heru.
Mm-hmm.
Aset is completely left out of the picture, in terms of the types of ways that people worship today. And I really think that's a problem. And I think it's too much done in that building, the buildings that have been erected, as opposed to taking the religion outside of that house and bringing it to the people. I think that's what the problem is. And then snubbing the people. I think that they have this superiority complex. So they snub their noses at other people who don't believe what they believe and worship the way they worship.
Mm-hmm.
I can remember having to go to church when I was younger and having people in the church laughing at me because they didn't like what the type of clothes my mother put on me to go to church. Like I really had something to do with that. But I was, castigated because I didn't look a certain way. So it's done more to divide us than it has been to bring us together. And then the message as well. And then, some of the stuff that we know, like the whole thing with Michelangelo and using the images of his aunt and uncle and his cousin, to come up with a composite for the holy, so-called Holy Family. There's just too much. We've been told too many lies, and we could go on and on. I'm not, well versed in all the information there is about the history of Christianity, but it's not a good one. Even if you think about it, and some people might get angry to hear that, but I'm going to say it anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Even the places where the nuns were housed, reading the history, at one point they were housed of prostitution, and nuns were nothing but prostitutes.
Right.
Mm-hmm. And you could go on, and this is not something that we wrote about the history of Christianity. These are Europeans writing about the history of Christianity, and they have the that show, and I think it still comes on TV. I only try to watch maybe one or two shows and then became disinterested. But like the Borgias, weren't they? Wasn't he a pope? And
he was a pope.
his children were all involved in all sorts of weird stuff.
Yeah.
So it's been a problem for us. We really don't know what we're worshiping. And the whole thing with the King James version of the Bible and what we know about him and his picadillos. There's so much that we really don't know. We've accepted the information blindly, and if that's what you want to do, that's fine, but at least know the history. And then don't get angry at people if they tell you, if they point out, information about the history of Christianity. Don't get angry, but unfortunately we do. And so I'm not a fan, and that doesn't win me brownie points with my family. But some of them, they're very much into church and that sort of thing, and so I become an outcast because of my beliefs. But it is what it is.
It is what it is. You're right. I agree with you on that. There's a lot of things we get into that. Like you said, there's a lot of things to dissect. I remember, what brought to my mind was when Pope Francis said something a couple of weeks ago about, I guess, Christians living double lives. And he was talking about you're a hypocrite if you live a double life as a Christian, if you're not Christ-like. And I'm thinking about the church being, y'all moving around priests like it's a witness protection program. And like you talk about the history of the nuns and stuff. Like, man, how can people allow their kids to be in the possession of these people? Like, how can you have 1 billion followers when the leadership in your church has been corrupted or compromised? How can people keep on continuing giving you more kids or sheep for the wolves to feed on? But it's not, but let's get back to we talking about this system, the religion of white supremacy, racism. And America believed in manifest destiny. White men believed it was their birthright to control and conquer North America. And like the biggest adversary to the Gullah GeecHEe people was Andrew Jackson. Could you tell us a little bit about who Andrew Jackson was and his role in this whole story?
Yeah, the greatest nemesis of the Gullah GeecHEe people. He basically single-handedly took it upon himself to go and create all sorts of ruses to go in there and try and bring those people back to their former enslavers, if they had former enslavers. Because some of the Gullah GeecHEe people have been living in Florida for hundreds of years, and they had never been enslaved. But so the ones that had ran away most recently, in terms of what Andrew Jackson knew, he wanted to bring not only them, he wanted to bring the people that had never been enslaved back to them. And he created, as I was saying, he created all these artificial means of trying to bring them back. He would even sacrifice his own people, his own soldiers, to try and create conflicts so that he could justify going over there and bringing them back. For instance, with the bombing of what the Europeans called that Negro Fort. Some people say that it was named Negro Fort. It was not named Negro Fort. The European people, angry that that fort existed over there, and there were melanated people who were in control of that fort after the British left, they called it, in a disparaging way, that Negro Fort. And so he wanted to go over there. Andrew Jackson, he thought of a way to go over there to try and start war. So he had his men go into that area and make believe that they were going over there to get fresh water to take put back on their ships. When in actuality they went over there to cause a conflict. And he knew that the melanated men who were in control of the fort, he knew that they were going to fight back, and that's what he wanted them to do. He wanted his men to go over there and mess with the women and children, which they did. He knew that the melanated men in control of the fort would be angry, which they were, and they went up there, when the men went over there, when the European men went over there and started messing with the women and children and tried to rape the women as well as the children, he knew the men were going to get angry and kill up everybody, and they did. And then he acted like he was so incensed and hurt, and how could you do this, when he orchestrated the whole entire thing, trying to make war. And he did that several times to try and get them to kill up his men so that he could justify going over there to start war. And basically, that's how the first Gullah GeecHEe war occurred, because he went over there. He did this actually 3 different times, going over there, sacrificing his own men, knowing that they were going to be killed, and then he could report back to the newspapers in the United States about how horrible the melanated men were. And they killed up everybody, they massacred everybody, and then used that as a means to get the support of the European people to invade a so-called sovereign nation, and then go over there and fight. That's actually how the United States was able to take control of Florida to begin with, because Florida was a Spanish colony, and if it was not for the Gullah GeecHEe people, Spain would have lost possession of Florida probably about 10 years into their owning it. But it was the Gullah GeecHEe people who helped them to maintain control over Florida. And so the Spaniards, after a while, they realized, we're not doing much here. The Gullah GeecHEe people are the ones who are keeping this area afloat. They're the ones with all the commerce and this, that, and the other. We need to get out of here. And I guess the United States, the Europeans of the United States, sensed that the Spaniards were going to lose control over Florida, and that's another reason why they went to war with the Gullah GeecHEe people, to try and get them out of Florida, so that the United States could take possession over Florida. But the Spaniards, they've never done anything. If you listen to John Henry Clark, he'll tell you about, the conditions of Spain prior to the coming of the Moors, and their condition since the Moors left Spain is not the greatest. Right now, they're still struggling. They've never been correct. But everything that they've done, you would think that, they've done that on their own, but their whole culture centers around Moorish history or Moorish advancement, teaching them, how to bathe, planting the crops from them, building the schools there for them. You could go on. And then what did they do? The whole thing. We don't even know much about that, or not many people know about that. The whole thing about bullfighting, that was their, a celebration of throwing the Moors out of their country. That's what bullfighting is all about, So if it wasn't for the Gullah GeecHEe people and the Moorish people, the people of Spain would still be, crawling on fours, and I think they still eat raw meat. But the condition of the country wouldn't be much different than it was prior to the Moors coming and civilizing them. Basically, that's what they did. They civilized them. That's what the whole thing about the baths were. The public baths, where they could go and clean their bodies, because they didn't even know anything about bathing. And then they took that particular advancement and turned it into something dirty, and then that's when they said, okay, we have to cut the public baths out, because they once went there just to bathe, and then they started to go there and have sexual relations with one another. And that's one of the reasons why they had to get rid of the public bath.
Wow. It's funny, like, it's like everywhere black people go, we have a civilizing effect. Or wherever we go, and wherever white people go, so it can be a very, like, a destructive path. It's interesting,
Right.
like, it's like an opposite, effect. But when you were saying that, I was thinking about America. How, black people were here and brought over here to civilize America and give it its culture and, its rich heritage. I mean, I just think it's fascinating when you start connecting the dots that there's nothing new under the sun. Like, everybody have a role to play in this thing called life. But I want to ask you, well, what does it take? What would it take for you to be able to create this history that you talk about, that you're passionate about, into a live action movie, a feature length film? What needs to be done?
I need I need a lot of money
Mm-hmm.
to do it the way that it really needs to be done. And I'm not talking about Hollywood type of movie, but $5 million wouldn't be a bad idea to do it the way that I really think it needs to be done. Battle scenes, for instance. During the first Seminole War, the so-called first Seminole War, which was the first Gullah GeecHEe War, there were over 5 major battles that were fought by these people. And so to try and bring that to the cinema, we're talking not only a lot in terms of the number of actors and extras that you need, but now we're talking about insurance and all the other things that go along with producing that type of those types of scenes. I did a trailer and I went on Indiegogo to try and raise money. That wasn't very, it wasn't helpful at all. I didn't get the type of response that I had hoped to get. And one of the reasons, even I think about this in my head over and over again about, how could I have done my trailers a little differently? But the problem was money. I didn't even have the money that I needed to do the trailers the way that I wanted. Also experience, this is my first screenplay, but it's a major one, and I think this is something that really, really needs to be told. But because of not having the money that I needed, I couldn't really do the trailers the way that I wanted to do. So I tried to focus in on some of the things that I thought that might interest people. For instance, Andrew Jackson. The man was a degenerate. He was sexual pervert and a degenerate. And so one of the trailers that I had actors produce showed him as being this nasty individual who was messing with black women. He had loads of children who were conceived from melanated women on his plantation. And so I focused in on one of the Negro bed wenches, and her name was Hannah. And I refer to her as being a Negro bed wench because she wasn't nice to the other melanated people that were living on the plantation with her. She was a snitch. She would go back and run and tell Andrew Jackson and his wife and other Europeans exactly what was going on. She was having a sexual relationship with Andrew Jackson, as well as other men that Andrew Jackson allowed to come onto his plantation. And when she got ready to have sex with these men, she would bring them to her cabin and make her husband, her name was Hannah. She would make her husband, Aaron, leave the cabin so that he could have sex with her. And so, I showed that particular, that was one of my trailers. I don't think people were too enthused about it, but I think of it as maybe not really wanting to see it because they want to think when the presidents, Thomas Jefferson and the rest of the gang were having sex with underage melanated girls, there was some sort of love involved. They were, devoted to them. I don't know what it is. I guess they wanted a scene like the one in Jefferson in Paris that was done a couple of years ago. Maybe they wanted to see something like that. But mine, you know, as they say, was raw. Some people even said it was terrifying. It showed him not being very nice to Hannah, treating her like a slut, you know, and not being very nice to her husband, emasculating her husband. And maybe they didn't want to see that. But I didn't make up that scene. All the information that I included with very little creative license came from the historical records of Andrew Jackson and his relationship with Hannah. For instance, he would get the black women to comb his hair, and he would give them the equivalent of a penny every time they combed his hair. You know, and that was usually his prior to having sex with him. He would have them comb his hair. And that came right out of the pages of history. You know, so the information I included, I don't think people especially cared for that. And, you know, fighting against him, like I said, he was one of the greatest nemesis, and he got the other prior to him, because becoming president of the United States, he got the other president during that time to go along with his scheme for trying to bring the Gullah GeecHEe people who had escaped, bringing them back here to the United States of America. You know, and that's something that I also talk about, him saying that he was going to Florida and deal with the nigger problem once and for all. But of course, we know that Andrew Jackson, he was unable to deal with the nigger problem. You know, those melanated soldiers, they dealt with him. They sent his butt packing. Even after the first Seminole War, or the first Gullah GeecHEe War, called the Seminole War, at the conclusion of that war, he decided, I better go pickle on somebody my own, my own side, someone I can deal with. So then he left from where the Gullah GeecHEe people lived and went over there and started messing with the people of the Spanish people who were living in Florida. And if you started the Gullah GeecHEe Wars in 1860 with the bombing of that Negro fort, and you ended in 1818, it took another 17 years before the United States even contemplated going back to Florida to try and make war against those Gullah GeecHEe people again. And when they went back the second time, they were unsuccessful. 17 years later, in 1835, they went over there again to try and mess with the people, and they sent them running back to the United States. And they defeated them. Their defeat of the United States was even more massive than it had been in the first Gullah GeecHEe War. And even after that war, they were still not defeated, meaning the Gullah GeecHEe people weren't defeated. And the United States waited again until 1842 before they went back again to try and to defeat them. And they still were not defeated. And as a matter of fact, they signed a treaty with the Gullah GeecHEe people. And to this day, the treaty that they signed with them, which is called the Article of Capitulation, is something that is very, very, you're not going to get your hands on. We know it's there, and we know it was signed, but getting your hands on, everyday citizens getting their hands on, including me, trying to get my hands on that particular document has been a tiring event. I've been trying for the longest to get my hands on the Articles of Capitulation that they signed with Abraham, who was one of the self-emancipated Africans who fought during the first and the second Seminole War, or the first and second Gullah GeecHEe War. And I have not been able to get my hands on the Article of Capitulation.
So do you believe it still exists? I mean, is it still in existence?
Oh, absolutely. It's probably sitting in someone's private collection, like a lot of our history is sitting. Or it could be, the Vatican could have it, because they said most of the information in the library of the Vatican has to deal with melanated people. I believe they said that the library, it's an underground library that runs about 6 miles underneath the Vatican. You know, so I'm sure there must be a copy there. If it's not an original, I'm sure there's definitely a copy of that particular article there. Treaty there, I should say.
Now, let's say we got access. Excuse me. Let's say we got access to this article. Do you think it could make a case for like people of African descent getting reparations in this country? Would it help make a strong case for that, or it doesn't make a difference?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. You know, what were the terms of agreement? You know, and if you listen to Claude Anderson, for example, he talks about other treaties and other information that we should have been included in terms of reparation that we're not, you know, and Barack Obama didn't help any. He was too busy helping other people to try and help us, you know, but he refused to recognize the treaties, you know, but, you know, that's a case that could be made maybe in before the World Court, you know, something that the lawyer's name is, you know, the lawyer with the O.J. case that's now deceased. I can't think of his name.
Johnny Cochran. Johnny Cochran.
Johnny Cochran, right? And some people say that's the reason why he was murdered. It had nothing at all to do with him winning the case with O.J. Simpson. It had more to do with his bringing reparations for melanated people in this country for the World Court, and that's the reason why he was assassinated.
Wow. So, what is the best way to find out more information about your project as well as to support it? How can we go about doing these things?
I have a website, and the name of the website is the Unconquered.movie. And you can go there and you can look at the trailers and you can read the information about the commentaries on the trailers. You can also go there and buy a T-shirt. I have a book for sale that I think is an important book. Some people think it's not. The Book of African American Names and Their Meaning. You can go there, or you can just go there and just donate to having the movie made, and no amount is too small of an amount. Let's say if I could get 1 million people to give $1 each, that money would go a long way. You know, so you don't have to go over there and make this, exorbitant amount or contribute this exorbitant amount. Every little bit helps. You know, I was reading something, I don't know who it's by, I'm trying to think of it now. Oh, Tecumseh, I believe it is. And he's someone else that I mentioned in my who else is in the movie, and I mentioned about him, and he's putting a curse on all the presidents of the United States, and that curse is still going. But he said one small twig will break, but if you put together many twigs, they're not going to break. So we could think ourselves as just being twigs that we can all put together, we can make something very strong. You know, and there's so many other stories that need to be told that we don't know about who we are. And this could be the start of that. You know, a lot of the people or a lot of the movies that we see on TV are European people acting out our history. Even some of the fairy tales, like Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. You know, that's supposedly a story that comes out of ancient Kemet. You know, there's so much that if we, if supporting me would give other people the ability to say, wow, she got the support, maybe they'll support me and I can tell the story about this. I can tell the story about that, because there's so much about our history that needs to be told. And this could be a way to start that that process, and making people see I can do that, I can be successful. Because right now, people, I think, are a little afraid to do anything to try and tell our story, because they're wondering whether or not they're going to get the support. And they know they need the support.
Definitely, most definitely. Everything you said is definitely on point. And I'm curious because you talk about your movie. We talked about this the other day as well. I was curious, who would you get to play Abraham? Who would be your ideal person to play Abraham?
Mm. Uh, I, uh, I don't know. I guess it would have to be a gentleman about 40 years old because Abraham, he was in his late 30s when he went to battle against the United States. I'm not so good with names right about now, but yeah, and who can who could really fill the part? Because I don't go to movies that much, unfortunately, because I don't see much of what I want to see in terms of what we're doing. But just a nice actor. I really don't know. Now I have other characters, and I thought about maybe some of them and who would play that role. And I can't even think of any names right now. And I know there's a whole thing now where people are a little upset because they're saying that most of the people that are playing in the movies nowadays, they're not from America at all. I think it was, I can't remember who it was that said that he was upset about that.
Oh, Sam Jackson? Was it Samuel Jackson? Or?
Yeah, Samuel Jackson, right. He said most of them are British actors. I don't see anything wrong with having British actors or, African actors for that much, for that, for those parts. But what about the melanated people from this country? How come they can't play those roles? Or is it something that they believe that they're not going to answer the questions, or they're not familiar with the history, so they wouldn't even know the history to it about what's going on in this country? I don't really know what that's about. Again, I'm not opposed to them acting. Even the young man that plays in Get Out,
right?
Daniel, is it Kaluuya?
I know you're talking about. Yeah. He's
right.
British.
They're saying that he's from Britain as well. And I'm not knocking them, and they should be able to work. But as Samuel L. Jackson said, couldn't they get someone from here?
Well, I would
not in need of those roles.
I would raise a question to Samuel Jackson and other people like him, support people like you to get those roles, to manifest those roles. Why not support people like you?
Right.
To help you manifest these roles for these people. Because I just think it's weird that I hear about black actresses, actors, and stuff complain about Hollywood, but Hollywood wasn't made for you. It was made for them, and they had a agenda. And like to me, regardless of what you feel about Tyler Perry, I respect his business model where he actually built his own studio. And he took care of his people. Right. But he had to sacrifice stuff in order to do that. And I'm saying to Sam Jackson, people like him, why not invest in people like you? You provided these screenplays and these roles for people to play, for them to take pride in their history. It's like even with Spike Lee, if you look at the history of Malcolm X movie, like Malcolm X movie, the movie rights was brought, I believe, back in 1972 by Marvin Worth from Betty Shabazz, Malcolm X's widow. It took him almost 20 years to make that movie, Malcolm X. You know what I'm saying? It took him a while. Even James Baldwin at one point was, picked to try to make a movie about Malcolm X, or he was campaigning for it. But even when Spike Lee got the approval of the studio, he still had to raise the money from people like Bill Cosby or Michael Jordan or Oprah Winfrey. He still had to raise money from other folks. But he went to the black celebrity community to get the money to complete Malcolm X. Had he not did that, we might never had a movie about Malcolm X, a feature movie about Malcolm, because the white folks didn't want to put the money behind it. They didn't want to put the budget behind it. But they always put the money behind stuff that lose money in Hollywood. But then, it's kind of interesting when people complain. I like Samuel Jackson, I do. But it's really interesting when people complain about opportunities in a system that don't even acknowledge your humanity as a black person.
That's true. You're absolutely right.
That's
And,
insanity.
I've contacted a lot of the people, that are making movies or could, be helpful to me. We have a conversation or something, but, I can't get anyone to talk to me, or as at this point, I haven't been able to get any of them. Maybe they will. Maybe hearing this, they will. Like I'd love to use Tyler Perry as one of his studios, to build the set, for my movie. Are you hearing? Because I've already contacted him. Are you hearing me, Tyler Perry? That would be very nice.
We'll tag him in this. You can get out there. You'd be surprised, though. You'd be surprised. Like you said, this technology is powerful. I remember I had talked to Dick Gregory. He was telling me, like, he had did a thing. Well, I guess Eddie Murphy was honored for the Kennedy Center Honors, the Mark Twain Prize, like back in, I believe, 2015. And he said, man, Eddie Murphy said he listened to like 6 hours of our interviews we did. That being Dick did. He listened to it. And I didn't know how Eddie Murphy was listening to what I was doing. And, you don't know. You just don't know what type of impact you're making. But, yeah, put this out there because, like, well, we don't understand. There's like almost 35,000 black millionaires in this country. The majority of those people made their money not by playing sports or singing for white people. They made their money through investments and behind the scenes. If you could reach like a couple of those 35,000 black millionaires out there, it's like, for example, there's a guy that gave $20 million to the black museum they built, the African American History Museum, the Smithsonian built in D.C. He gave as much money as Oprah to build that museum, but a lot of us don't know who he is. I believe his name is Robert Smith. I believe that's his name. But he's a multi-billionaire. And he's not on everybody's television every night, performing or entertaining folks. He made his money in a different way. He invested. He did it the Wall Street way. So anyway, there's people out there that's looking to put something behind something. And a lot of times people are so afraid, like these celebrities are so afraid to rock the boat. That's why they're not really powerful like that. Because they too afraid to speak their mind. Everybody can't be like Nick Cannon, walking away from millions of dollars because on principle alone. He said, you ain't gonna make me your slave. But a lot of folks don't mind, playing that role. A lot of folks don't mind being that bad wench or that coon, whatever people want to call people now. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I contacted Nick Cannon too. Hey, give me a call, Nick Cannon.
No, well, he might give you a call. You never know. He might. He's like one type of dudes that really want to help people. Like he helped a lot of people behind the scenes. And if you're getting it right, a lot of times when we try to connect with these celebrities, they still got these firewalls up, all these assistants, and people think they're doing them a favor by not connecting them with certain people. And a lot of times when you meet them one-on-one, they might not be what you think they are. They might, be very generous and kind, but, you got to think about it in that position. You got so many people reaching out to you, trying to get with you. And you got a lot of folks blocking people from getting to certain people. But I bet you if you could get along with these people, one of those people out of that group you get with, like, I'm talking about these millionaires, celebrities, I bet you 1 or 2 or 3 would support what you're doing.
Right. And I'm not just doing this for myself or just my family. I'm doing this for all of us. I'm bringing a story that needs to be told.
Mm-hmm.
We need to know about our history.
Right.
The things that we did that no one else is talking about, the things that nobody wants us to hear about, that'll make you proud, that will make you look yourself and your children a little differently, in my estimation, anyway. Some people could say, this is one of those movies about war, But that's something we need to know. We need to know we fought back. We need to know that we were thriving. I think it's just extremely, extremely important that we hear this, that we don't leave the movie. Because a lot of people, when they leave the movie and they see another black man being hung, or another woman being beat, like in 12 Years a Slave, when the young enslaved woman was beaten to a pulp. How are you supposed to feel when you see that sort of stuff? Does it make you leave and want to go home and create? Or does it make you feel so crestfallen? The only thing that you can do is maybe go and get something to eat and go to sleep. I know I don't want to see anything any more of that type of movie any longer. I'm sure there are a lot of other people out there. And this would be the way to start that, where we see something of this story is of epic proportions. And we need to know about it. We need to see it. We need to be proud and go to the movie and, say, wow, this is us. This is what we did. And we did it once and we can do it again. We're talking about economics now and, being gentrified and, having everything that we have taken away from us. This might be the thing that we need to help and bring stuff back to us, where we can say we did it before and we can do it again.
Mm-hmm.
We're showing people with dignity and pride, who were fantastic businessmen. You think of in the 18th and the 19th century, these people were noted all around the world for their ability to grow things that everybody wanted. It was a superior quality. These are people who had fled their enslavers. Many of them had fled their enslavers, and within years of fleeing, they were able to build these settlements, and nobody's telling you about the stuff that you see on what do you call it? Many of these internet searches where they show these little beat up cabins and that sort of stuff. That's not it at all.
Mm-hmm.
These people were out here and they would build. Some of the buildings that they were erected were 2 stories tall. But when you see these pictures on, if you go into do a Google search, they'll show these little huts with thatched roofs and that sort of stuff on top of it.
Mm-hmm.
They're not telling you the truth, So we need to see what our history really was, as opposed to what it is that they've been telling us our history was. And this movie could be the start to do that. I'm not going to say it's the end all be all, but it's definitely a start.
And start we must. So I want to thank you, sister. How you pronounce your name, and what is the origin of your name? I know you said you told us a little bit about your last name, but what is the origin, and how do you properly pronounce your name?
Right. My name is Talagbe, and that's a Yoruba name, and it means one who uplifts riches and wealth. And of course, Ogunleye, as I said, means he who comes to make war, or she who comes to make war. And that's also a Yoruba name. And my husband is Yoruba, and that's how I got the name, or names. As I said, I'm from New York, but I'm a GeecHEe, Yamasi woman, a proud GeecHEe, Yamasi Moorish woman. And that's my name.
What's in the name? There you see it. Names are very powerful. Like I tell us about, your words create worlds. So you definitely are a conqueror. You definitely are an emancipator. And you definitely are of the people. So Dr. Talagbe, I want to thank you so much for being on our show, for honoring our platform. And I also thank you for this wonderful shirt you gave me. It's one of my favorite shirts now. I mean, your shirt is, I get a lot of compliments on the shirt. People like, oh, I mean, they're fascinating. I had this one white woman who's training to be a professor. She's a doctoral candidate at University of Memphis. And she was so hypnotized by your shirt, because she's really into African culture and Black history and all that stuff. So she was very taken aback by the shirt and by the quote on the back of the shirt. And I always
thank you. And
yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say that's Abraham's quote.
Wow, but it let you know.
The back of the shirt.
And that was a powerful quote, because it let you know too. I always tell people, I was in a church last week promoting a project I'm a part of. And I was at the pulpit of all places, and I told the people, I said, the real Holy Trinity is the Black man, woman, and child. We are the Holy Trinity, not this other stuff. We are the real one. Until we understand that, until we understand that, we'll never get anywhere, because it takes us working together to get what we need, So I want to thank you once again. In the words of Great Together, we love you madly. Keep on producing and pushing.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And thank you for having me on your show.
I was an honor, man. The time went by too fast. I might have you back on again very soon. Never know.
Okay. I'd love to come back.
That's excellent. All right. Take care.
Okay. You take care too. And thank you again.
Yes, ma'am. No problem.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.